Hi, everybody. So today we're going to go over adding Ortelius to your pipeline. And in order to do that, we're going to be focusing on the Ortelius CLI. I am Steve Taylor. I am one of the chief architects and contributors to the Ortelius project, and I will be walking you through that process today. So to get started, we're actually going to go over to the documentation. And we're going to go into the first steps. Get started by adding Ortelius to your pipeline section. So one of the things that we're going to do in this process is look at what's needed for the CLI, what it's going to do for us, and how we're going to capture information from your pipeline process and feed it into Ortelius. So one of the first things we need to do is to have a version of Ortelius either running locally, or we're going to go ahead and use the Deploy Hub team version. So if we're going to run things locally, we can go over to Artifact Hub, just type in Ortelius in the search bar, and we'll be able to get the Helm charts to install locally in the instructions. I'm actually going to go ahead and run everything. I'm going to set up an account with the Deploy Hub team, and I'm going to do that that way so I can just use the SaaS version. So let me get logged in here and go down to the bottom. I'll have my sign up piece. There it is. So the company name, I'm just going to make up one. So we're going to do, let's say, a spring demo. And the project, we'll call it Hello World. My first name, my email, and I'm going to create a user ID in this company and project. So I'm going to go ahead and call it Spring Demo Admin. And I'll use my very secure password that you'll see later. And I'm going to go ahead and hit sign up, get rid of all those screens. And that's going to go ahead and get us over to an account over on the Deploy Hub team SaaS version. That's going to take a few minutes to get created. So in the meantime, we're going to go back to our documentation. And one of the things that we're going to need to do is install the CLI locally. So I'm going to install, the CLI actually uses Python, and it's actually, the package is hosted on PyPy. So if we go and do a search for Ortelius here, we'll see that we have the Ortelius CLI and the details about all the flags and stuff like that, and it's basically the README for the CLI that we're going to use. And here's going to be the install. And I actually happen to be using both versions of Python. So I have Python 3 and 2.7, but I'm going to go ahead and do my pip install, Ortelius CLI. And because I probably have an older version, I'm going to tell it to upgrade anyways. So that went out to PyPy and brought down our latest version here of our package. So the 93222 should be the version that we just downloaded from over here. So now I have my local environment all set. We're going to need some code to work with. So I'm going to take a Spring Boot demo, and I'm actually going to fork it, and I'm going to use that as our repo that we're going to pull information from. Now this can be any repository. It doesn't have to be a Spring Boot one, but basically we just need something to gather our Git information from. So I already had that forked. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to clone it. So we go back over to our window, do my git clone. All right. So like I said, this is a Spring Boot that has been wrapped up into a Docker file. So if we actually look at the Docker file, we'll see where they actually do the Maven build, create the jar file, and then we go ahead and run with that from that level. You'll see here that we just have the source code down in our lower levels, some test cases. There's nothing to do with our like a Git action, GitHub action, or anything to do with Ortelius. So basically, this is just a demo repo that we get to work with. So let's go ahead and go back to our instructions. And one of the things we need to do is to start gathering information between your pipeline and Ortelius is to insert in the CLI command. So one of the things to do that is we're going to actually run this locally to start with. So I'm not going to hook in any like Jenkins file or GitHub action or Google Cloud build at this point. I'm just going to do everything locally to simulate what the pipeline is going to do. And then later on, we'll go ahead and add into a GitHub action to do our actual build process over on when we check in and do things on an actual pipeline. So some of the information that we needed to kind of expose from the pipeline side is going to be the deploy, the URL, the user ID, password, the name of the repository, the image tag, those type of things. We need to go ahead and push over and make available. So I'm going to create a little shell script here, grabbing this information. So if I go back to my Visual Studio, I'll do a new file, dhenv.sh, paste in. And like I said, I'm using, because we signed up with the SaaS, the Deploy Hub team, which is basically Ortelius running. I'm going to go ahead and use that URL. My user ID was Spring Demo admin. Oops. And you'll see my super secure password. And I think I'll push this over to my Docker Hub account. And we'll do Spring Boot demo. And we'll just give it an image tag of version 1.0.0. So let me go ahead and save that. And I'm going to actually go back to my command prompt, cd into my Spring Boot demo directory. And let's see what we got here. Yep, it's there. So I'm going to say source dhenv.sh. So if we do environment and sort it, pipe it through more, we'll take a look at our super secure password and our Docker information that we set up in our image tag. So that's all looks good there. So from there, now we have our basically the information that connect up to Ortelius. One of the things that we need to do is provide to Ortelius the information that we can't derive from the pipeline. And that includes from the Git repo, from the pipeline process itself, from other tools that may be as part of the pipeline. Let's say if you're running like Veracode or something like that, and we want to pass across Veracode results over into Ortelius, we need to do that using a TOML file. So this TOML file basically is going to allow us to define that non-derived data. And some of that's going to be like, what's the name of the application, the version of the application, what do we name our component? Because when we get into a microservices world, we're going to have many microservices that make up a single application. So we're going to have multiple, a component TOML file for every single microservice, basically. So I'm actually going to go here, grab the sample here. We're going to put that in, and we'll do another new file, component.toml. I'm going to put that in. Now, when we signed up, we did the our company name, our project name, and then from there, we need to build that out as part of the domain structure. So I'm gonna go ahead and log back in over on the Deploy Hub side into that account that we created and grab that information. So when we created our highest level, we have global, and then our spring demo, and then our hello world at that level. So that's going to be kind of our domain structure is going to be that lowest level. So that's what I'm going to copy that domain, if I can grab it. And that's going to be part of where we're going to put our application. And so that beginning part is like the folder structure. And now we'll go ahead and call it our Hello World app. And we're going to use version 1. I'm actually going to add a few levels to that. And then we're going to have to tell it where we're going to put our component. The variant, so variants, you can think of that as the feature branch. Next, I'm going to go ahead and give it the component, the microservice itself, a version as well. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of tie it to the application version. So we're going to do v100, and then we're going to take the build number. And this would be the build number coming from the pipeline tool. So we're actually going to, because we're going to run this locally, we're going to stub that out. We're just going to make up a build number for our local test here. And then we're going to take the get SHA. So the -G is just a placeholder. And then we're going to take the short SHA from the Git repo. Other things that we're going to add to this, we're going to go ahead and grab the set the Docker build date, the Docker repo, determine the digest, the image tag. If we have like any service catalog data, like in this case, we're going to use a Discord channel, the service owner, the service email. If we had, like I said, like varicode information, other metrics that we want to gather and attach to this version of the component, we would go ahead and add on to that attribute list. The attributes can be anything. There are certain ones that we do look for. So if we actually go back over to PyPy here, we'll see that there's a set of attributes that we are actually go ahead and gather and grab automatically. So in the TOML file, I'm not going through and defining every single variable. If we had a chart to deploy this, we would want to put the chart name in there. Some of that information we would want to go ahead and give to Ortelius that we can't drive. You can't really derive the chart very easily, so that's one of those supplied values. Things start with like the Docker and the Git. Most of those we can drive by running commands against the Git repo and Docker commands to find out what's happening on that. Also, if we have a license in that repository, we would go ahead and pull in that license, the README. If there's an open API or Swagger file, we'd want to give that information as well. Again, this is just some of the default information that we gather. You can add anything you want to that key value pair attributes. So let's go ahead and save that. We'll go ahead and build that. Should go pretty quick. So this is your Docker build. Normally would be done in your pipeline process. Here we're just doing it manually to get a Docker image that we can then scan at that level. We can see that we have our image here that we just created 30 seconds ago. So we're actually going to go ahead and scan that image for the SBOM data. In order to do that, we're actually going to use another third-party tool called Sift. Sift is from Encore. They do a pretty good job of scanning images and source code directories and things like that. So I'm going to just go ahead and run the install here. To generate the SBOM, we're going to take the Docker repo and tag. We're going to look at all the layers, and you can scope this just to like the latest layer or the top layers for getting dropping off the ones that you were built from. But we need some data, so we're going to scan all layers, and we're going to output to the CycloneDX format. We can use CycloneDX or the SPDX format. The CycloneDX is, I like it because it's a little bit easier to understand the JSON. It's not as confusing as the SPDX JSON layout. If we go back to Visual Studio, we have our CycloneDX. So we're actually going to go ahead and pass all this information over to Ortelius now. It's a simple command. If we go back to our documentation, we are going to run this command. So we're going to run the DH update comp. We're going to give one of the parameters is going to be our component TOML, and we're also going to give it the JSON file for the SBOM. So that's going to be the one that we're going to run. If you generated it with SPDX, then you'd use the SPDX prefix. Or if you skip that step around the SBOM, then you're just going to go ahead and run this example here. So let's go ahead and run our command. Oh, first, we need a build number. So if you remember back in our TOML file, we created a build number, or we're going to use a build number. Because we don't have, we're not running in the context of a pipeline at this point, we need to make up a build number. So we're just going to say it's going to be build number 1. One of the next steps we're going to do is we're going to take and resolve all the variables. So anything in the curly brackets is a variable, like the SHA, the branch, all this information. And we're going to go ahead and resolve all that, those details. And this is mainly because we're running locally, but it doesn't hurt to have the extra step of the environment variable resolution. Okay, so one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to generate another shell script that is going to resolve a lot of the environment variables. So anything in the curly brackets is an environment variable. The short SHA, the get branch, the digest, image tag. We're going to go through and resolve all those variables and make them grab the values from like the Git repo, those type, and Docker to get those variables resolved. In order to do that, we're going to run a simple command line, env_vars_sh. You'll see before, or this is going to be env script. It's going to take the TOML file as input, and we're going to create a new shell script. So we found at this level, we have our SH file. So if you go back over to Visual Studio, and we can see all those information like the Git branch, the Docker repo, the license file, all those have been resolved. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to source that in before I run our final step of sending all the information up to Ortelius. So I'm going to source resolved. And now we're going to go ahead and send everything over. And here we're going to do the update comp, again with the component TOML and our SBOM data. So let's give that a go. Okay, we'll walk through this as soon as it finishes. So you'll see that it read the component TOML. So this is the attributes that came from the component TOML. One of the things that did not get resolved was the digest. And the reason for that being unresolved is we did not push the Docker image up to Docker Hub. The only way you get a digest in the Docker world is to actually push it up to a registry and then query the registry about what the digest is. Not going to worry about that now, because when we move over to doing all this in a pipeline process, that variable will actually be resolved because we'll actually push our image somewhere. Next, we created our parent component, and then we created our individual version of our microservice. So this is where we had our version 100, our build number followed by the git SHA. So that was created, and then all the other attributes that we were able to derive. So some of the things that we're able to figure out was like the git commit authors, number of committers on the repo, the lines deleted, those type of things we're able to gather and associate to our microservice version. And finally, we went and added our component version to our new application version. So if we go back over to our team version here, we can see I got our Hello World app and our version 0. And we have our microservice as one of our dependencies, and then the SBOM that's being aggregated up from all of the individual components. So in this case, we only have the one component. So that one component ended up having a lot of dependencies, and we can actually see that one of the dependencies, the YAML, the libyaml, actually has a CVE that we need to address at that level. So if I actually go into the component level, we can see we have our base component followed by our microservice component. And again, we're going to have that same level of detail around the information that we gathered. Like I said, this is where that digest was unresolved. That will get fixed when we actually go ahead and do our plug into a GitHub action. Other things that we were able to drive, the git commit, the repo, the tag, the git URL, we were able to pull in the README file. This service didn't have any Swagger information, so we didn't upload any Swagger. Here's our SBOM data again with our individual vulnerability, the license file that was grabbed, and then additional attributes that we were able to grab. So like I said, the lines added, deleted, total, the repos, details about that information as well. We can see the consuming application is the Hello World app, and we should be able to see our map, our association here at that level. So at this point, we've actually gone through and created a component and an application version in a few short steps within our local environment. Now, our next step is we're going to actually go ahead and do this through a pipeline. Okay, so our next step is going to be creating a GitHub action that will do everything that we did at the command line. So we'll set the environment variables in the action, and then we'll go ahead and run the sift along with the Ortelius CLI commands to upload the information over to Ortelius. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy a file that I've done earlier just to save some typing, and we'll walk through it. So let me go ahead and copy this over. So let's go ahead and walk through a GitHub action. They're pretty easy. You could just think of it as the steps of things that you would do normally at the command line. So one of the things that we're going to do is whenever anybody pushes to the master branch, we're going to go ahead and run this workflow. So we're going to run it on Ubuntu, and we're going to set these global environment variables. So we're going to set what our Ortelius server is. Like I said, we're using the deploy hub team, which is Ortelius running on our SaaS, our user ID, our super secret password, and we're going to set an environment variable saying that we're going to push over to Quay. So in this case, we're actually going to utilize Quay as our repository versus Docker Hub. So let me make sure we have that set on this side. So we are all set there. One of the first things we're going to do is we're going to check out basically clone the repo. And after we clone the repo, we're going to do a couple kind of like housekeeping things. In the GitHub world, the way you pass things around is through this GitHub env file. So what we're going to do here is we're going to derive the image version from GitHub itself. So the image version will be one of the information that will derive and pass along in the component toml. It's one of those default variables that we're going to go ahead and grab. And we're also going to use the image version environment variable later in this workflow. So this is looking at the GitHub run number, getting the SHA, cutting it down so it's a short SHA instead of the long one. And then we're going to derive the image tag. So this right here is going to determine basically the branch name, which equates to our variant. Again, our GitHub run number and our SHA, and that all gets passed into our environment variable file. Next, we're going to actually just going to set up some Git stuff so it doesn't complain about us doing anything without a user ID or email. So that's just some housekeeping there. Next, we're actually going to log into Quay so we can push our image over to our Quay repository. Again, the user ID password normally would be set like we do here in a secret instead of having exposed in the workflow itself. So we'll actually get flagged about a user ID password from a security scan, but that's okay. We're not worried about that for this demo. Next, we're going to build our image. So this is going to be our registry, our repository. I'm actually going to change this because I want to tag it with hello world, because that's what I have set up on the Quay side. So I'm actually going to tag it slightly different than where I copied this starter action from. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and generate our SBOM. Again, we're going to scan the same image that we just built. So we're going to build and push, and then we're going to go ahead and scan that information. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and do our CLI step. So out of all this, all we're really adding on to it is just another step into our pipeline process. Instead of doing really, it's if we want to SBOM and the Ortelius CLI, it's two little steps that we add. In this case, we're going to go ahead and install our CLI. pip3 is the default on GitHub Actions. That's how come we're using pip versus pip3. We're going to run and resolve all of our environment variables, expose them up, and then do our upload over to Ortelius. So we're going to take that same component toml that we did before, and we're going to reuse it in our action. One of the things we need to do is set up our secrets over on the GitHub side, so we can go ahead and log in over and make sure that we can upload to Quay. So in order to do that, I have to do one step on the GitHub side, which is assign the secrets to my new repository that I forked. Okay, now I have my Quay user ID and password all set. We're going to go ahead and check in our code, our changes. All right, and let's go ahead and push that. So let's go ahead and take a look at our actions. So if you go to your repo under actions, see that our build is actually running out here. And if you click on the details, we'll see where we're at. Okay, looks like our SBOM has been finished. Yep. And now we'll go ahead and update the component. Again, you're going to see a similar thing that we did from the command line ourselves outside of the GitHub action. We're going to have our information about our component, and we're going to resolve a bunch of that information and upload the details. So now with our GitHub action finished, if we actually go back over to Ortelius, we'll see that we still have that same application version because we did not increment the application version as part of our process. We could do that automatically, and we have our new component dependency right here. So let's look at our components, and we have our new component here. And we can see more details. We have our build number, build ID, some of our tags, our commits. Again, we're pulling in the README. Everything that we saw from the command line is, again, being pulled in automatically as part of that process. So with that, we're able to add into our pipeline process with just two simple steps. Simple step here can be added to pretty much any pipeline tool. So whether you're on Jenkins, Google Cloud Build, again, GitHub Actions, if you have Azure pipelines, we're just going to be adding in a few simple commands to make all this happen. So that's how we get the information from your pipeline tool through the Ortelius CLI and grab all those goodies and push them into the Ortelius UI so we can view them easily. We can see the SBOM, the vulnerabilities, the README, the Swagger. All that good information is available all in one place. And again, that's all going to aggregate up to the application level through all the microservices. So if you have 100 microservices, we will be showing those dependencies and all the SBOM data at that level, including all the CVE information that we find from those low-level dependencies. So that's it. If you need any help, reach out to me on Discord, and I will give you a hand getting this set up. Thank you very much.